Good evening, Mr. Hayden.
Good evening.
How are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Praise the Lord. No complaint. Good evening, honorable colleagues. I'm not sure who's on here.
Good evening, Madam.
Good evening,
Good
Madam
evening.
Chair.
Good evening, honorable colleagues.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
All right. Let me know when we can start.
As soon as we begin to record, I believe.
All right. Say when.
Hold on one moment, Madam Chair. Yes, we have 6 Finance Committee members present, so that establishes our quorum.
All righty. Let me know when we're recording. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Tonight starts the budget meetings. Thank you for being here. I hope all our residents are safe in this COVID-19 pandemic time. As we go through these meetings, we just ask for patience so that we get the job done and work together as one unit. Thank you. And with that, I'll start by reading our notice for this evening. Aldermanic notice, New Haven. The Finance Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 6 p.m. via teleconference. Meeting can be viewed at https://bit.ly/2nptiwr or by phone at 301-715-8592 or 312-626-6799. Meeting webinar ID 935-0012-9290. Phone password 927-451749. Item number 1, OR-2021-0004. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing budget transfer number 721-21-1, transferring funds from the Office of Building, Inspection and Enforcement salary account in the amount of $25,000 to the overtime account. And item number 2, workshop to receive a briefing from the assessor's office concerning the grant list of the city of New Haven. Item number 3, workshop to receive a briefing from management and budget on the annual budget for fiscal year 2021/2022 starting July 1, 2021. Item 4, to hear public testimony concerning the mayor's annual budget for fiscal year 2021-2022. These items are filed with the city clerk and may be inspected at room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, Honorable Yvette Hamilton, Chair. Attest, Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance, 203-946-8122 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY. Public may join the meeting and may send public comments to public testimony at newhavencity.gov. Meeting can be viewed via teleconference. at https://bit.ly/2nptiwr or by phone at 301-715-8592 or 312-626-6799. Meeting webinar ID 953-0012-9290. Phone password 927-451749. Thank you. Good evening to everyone. We will start with our attendance from the committee. Adam Marchand,
Present.
Ernie Santiago, Salvatore DiCola,
Here.
Jeanette Morrison,
Here.
Taisha Walker-Myers,
Here.
Anna Festa,
Here.
Richard Furlow,
Here.
Evelyn Rodriguez,
Here.
Ron Hurt,
Present.
thank you, Charles Decker. Alder Decker, I see you on the screen, but I don't hear you. I would like to also acknowledge, I think I saw in the audience Alders Frank Douglas and Alder Abby Roth. I'm not sure if I've missed any other Alder. I see Alder Delphine Clyburn, Alder Carmen Rodriguez. Have I missed anyone else? Any of our colleagues that have joined us this evening? Welcome to everyone. Alder Ellen Cupo. I see Alder Cupo also. Good evening, Alder Decker. Thank you all for being here this evening. As usual, we'll start with our procedure. I will turn the meeting over to Alder Marchand, my vice chair, to go over the procedure of how the meeting will be run, and we'll go right into the items before us this evening. Thank you. Alder Marchand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to welcome everybody to this meeting. We have 4 items on the agenda. The first is a transfer. It's an item related to the current fiscal year. That's the only voting item we have this evening. Then we have 2 workshops. Our assessor will give an update on the grand list, and our director of management and budget will give an overview of the mayor's proposed budget. Both those 2 items are workshops. We're encouraging colleagues, please, to save your detailed departmental questions for the appropriate departmental workshop, which will happen later on in the cycle. Then we'll move into the public hearing. We have a long list of people who've signed up to testify. We are going to ask people to keep their testimony to 3 minutes or less in duration. We have a list of people already, and we'll start with the list of folks on the list. If a member of the public has come to the meeting and wishes to testify, you may put a quick comment in the Q&A to catch the staff's attention, or raise your hand using the participants buttons, and that you can do that during the public portion. For those folks who have already submitted written testimony, when your name is called, you may simply tell us that you would not wish to speak, but let your written testimony be enough. If you would like to speak in addition to having submitted written testimony, we ask you not to read the full text of your written testimony, but rather to summarize and perhaps to highlight the most important points you wish to make. We have many people wishing to testify, and we do need folks to stay within the 3-minute time limit. After the public hearing is open, we will close the public portion. We'll vote on item 1, make a few announcements, and then adjourn. During the first 3 items, our members of the committee are invited to ask questions as per our usual procedure. Madam Chair will go through the roster as she did at the beginning of our meeting to take attendance. We had asked people, members of the committee, please to limit yourself to 4 questions, keeping in mind as well that the detailed questions that we'll ask to department heads and coordinators, we can do at the appropriate workshop later on in the cycle. I've already mentioned how folks may testify. If you already communicated to the Office of Legislative Services through the email that you wish to testify, then we have got your name. If you have not done that, but you do wish to testify, please, during the public portion, either put in a remark in the Q&A or raise your hand in the participants, and we'll add you to the list. And of course, members of the public are invited to submit testimony at any time during this budget process by emailing publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. Again, publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. And you can submit that at any time. It'll become part of the public record. Finally, the next opportunity to testify on the budget is in live via Zoom is on Tuesday, the 30th of March. That is the next meeting of the Finance Committee. We'll have some departmental workshops and the second of our 3 public hearings. Finally, I would just like to say that our goal tonight is to open the public portion by 7. That means going through the first 3 items in the next 50 minutes. We think we can do that, but we encourage colleagues to be concise. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. And with that, we'll hear the first item on our agenda this evening.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just to avoid confusion, it might be reasonable for our colleagues who are not on this committee to go off cam so that there's no confusion on who may ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair.
So noted. Thank you, Majority Leader Furlow. All right, we will proceed with the first item before us this evening.
Which one are we doing, Madam Chair?
The
Item number
OBIE
1.
transfer, Mr. Lucas,
Gotcha.
as per our agenda.
Where is Jim?
Members of the public will note that in the world of Zoom, sometimes it takes a moment to bring people into the meeting and bring people back to the waiting room. So we thank you for your patience.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Tercio, your name and address for the record, please.
Jim Tercio, 229 Nealon Road, New Haven.
Michael Garmany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut.
Mr. Tercio, are you able to turn on your camera?
No, I'm using my phone right now. No camera on the phone.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I will start out the transfer for Mr. Tercio, and then he can add and chime in anything that he feels necessary for this overtime transfer. So as the ordinance read, we are transferring $25,000 from the salary account in the Office of Building Inspection and Enforcement into their overtime account. The reason for the transfer is because we have seen quite a bit of turnover as far as retirement and other areas in the Office of Building Inspection and Enforcement. We had, for the full year, we've had an average of 3 to 5 vacancies between assistant building inspectors, assistant electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors, just the overall positions in Mr. Tercio's office. In order to comply with different guidelines via state or local, we need to have these inspectors working overtime to complete the inspections for his office. And again, I will remind the committee, Mr. Tercio's department, part of these inspections are revenue generating based on what they're looking at as well. So again, the reason for the transfer is basically we've seen a ton of vacancy, 3 to 5 vacancies is the average in his department, which means that the inspectors that we do have to work overtime. So the $25,000 is being transferred to the overtime projected for the remainder of the year. Again, depending on how busy building department is, you know, that that's a projection that we see through the end of the fiscal year. In relation to COVID, this overtime is not COVID related. Again, the inspections that you've seen for the COVID task force have been done by Mr. Tercio himself, which as an executive management employee, as the head building official, is not overtime eligible. So again, this overtime that we're seeking is really for the regular duties and inspections that the building department has to get done on a daily basis. And again, as a reminder, this is a revenue generating department in which we have to abide by certain guidelines. So Mr. Tercio, I don't know if you want to add anything or just open it up for questions.
No, Michael, I think you covered everything. Thank you very much. And we'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Alder Marchand, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is really about those vacant positions. Are those positions posted? Do you have any sense when they might be filled? I know that yours is a busy department. Wondering if you have any help on the way.
Yeah, I'm hoping to hire 2 building inspectors by the end of the month. Unfortunately, we're in 90 days for a plumbing inspector. We still haven't got an assistant plumbing inspector after 3 postings. And we may have to do another posting. But I'm hoping to get 2 more building inspectors by April 1st.
Mr. Tercio, thank you for that answer. Do you feel that you've been able to keep up with the workload using the overtime to cover these hours that are not filled because of your vacancies?
At this time, we're just getting by with the overtime, yes. Did you get that? I'm not sure if you heard.
Yes, we're just waiting for Madam Chair to call on the next alder. Thank you.
Oh, are you finished? I did
Yes,
not know.
I am, ma'am.
Okay. Next, Alder Ernie Santiago, are you on the call? Alder DeCola, do you have any questions?
No, they've been answered. Thank you.
Alder Morrison?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Alder Walker Myers, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one. Mr. Tercio, I know you said that you had to post one of the jobs 3 times. Can you talk a little bit about the barriers to the posting? Like, is it just because of COVID that you think people aren't responding? Or because I know you said that you think you will hire 2 people by April 1st, but is that not within the same category of this job that you just posted 3 times?
The 2 I'm hoping to hire on April 1st are building inspectors. The one that I posted 3 times is a plumbing inspector, and there's certain criteria. And this is an excellent question. Certain criteria they have to be a plumbing inspector. They have to have an S1 and a P1, a heating and a plumbing inspector's license, plus a state license to do the inspections. And there's a shortage of people. And other towns and cities pay more. So they're going to go for the higher money before they come to New Haven. But that's an excellent question. We're running into a lot of we've lost 4 inspectors to other towns and cities this year.
Thank you for that answer. So I guess my only one follow-up question to that, you don't see any issue with getting these 2 inspectors come April, or should we expect that the same thing might happen? Someone come, leave because of more money, or you'll have trouble filling a job, even though they don't have to have the same criteria as the other plumbing inspector that you talked about?
I've reached out to these 2 people before, and they're actually hoping to come to New Haven. They want to come to New Haven, so hopefully they stay. Yep.
Are you finished, Alder?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Alder Festa?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Let's see, Alder Marchand and President Walker Myers asked my questions, but just a follow-up, why are we losing people to other towns? Is it pay? Is it benefits?
It's definitely pay. I mean, we are one of the lowest in the state. I just lost one guy to Southington. He's probably getting a $19,000 raise just to go to Southington. So it's money. Without a doubt, it's money.
Is there a plan, a hiring plan that's going to be put into place? Or are we thinking about a plan to move forward to fill these spots?
Hopefully we have 2 spots, like I said, on April 1st, full. We are becoming a training ground for inspectors all over the state. They come here, they learn the proper procedures, and they move on.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for everything your department's been doing, because I know you guys have been working hard all year. And I think this is one of the first times your department is coming to us for overtime funding. So thanks for all that you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Madam Chair, you seem to be muted. So I'll hand it over to Alder Furlow, who's next in the queue. There
Thank
you
you,
go.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. They were answered. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Alder Evelyn Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Tercio.
All right, Alder Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions were answered. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam President for asking those questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. Alder Decker.
I have no questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Does anyone have a follow-up before we move on? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? And for a third time, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Hearing none? Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, starting with the assessor's office.
So we thank Mr. Tercio for his testimony, and soon we
Thank you, Mr. Tercio, for your testimony this evening. If you want to stay with us, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will stay.
All right, next item on our agenda is the workshop hearing from the assessor's office on the grand list.
Madam Chair, your Vice Chair here, I just want to recognize Alder Steve Winter, who has joined us.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Marchand, and good evening to Alder Winter. Thank you for joining us. And good evening, Mr. Poulin. I see you. Name and address for the record, sir.
Alex Poulin, address 6 Pequot Avenue, North Haven, Connecticut. Can you guys hear good?
Yes, sir.
Well, good evening. How's everyone doing?
Very well, and you?
Doing all right. I can't complain. So I'm here tonight at the request of the committee to give a brief overview of the 2020 grand list, which my department signed on January 31st. Currently, it's a non-revaluation year, so typically we don't see growth, but it's also towards the end of a revaluation cycle, so we don't see any losses as we typically would from court appeals, because most of them have been settled already. The next revaluation is scheduled for the grand list of 2021 next year, and while we don't have the statistical data analyzed yet, we're in the beginning stages of the reval. The process is currently underway. The data mailers were sent out to all improved properties in the city. This happened on December 16th. And currently we are verifying the data from 837 sales and any requests that taxpayers have made through the data mailer process for their properties to be viewed. As of January 26th, we have inspected in the field. The police have been notified of their names, the make and models of their vehicles and their plate numbers. And all the data inspectors not only have badges, but they also have a letter signed by me so that people know they are indeed legit. They're instructed not to gain entrance into anyone's home. They're measuring from the outside and speaking with homeowners from the porch or through the screen door if necessary, as is consistent with COVID protocols. We're going to do more outreach to the different neighborhoods prior to finalizing the values, but that won't happen until we get more of the data analyzed. As I said, we're currently in the beginning stages. On to the actual grand list for this year, 2020. The net taxable grand list is approximately $6.7 billion. And this is up 1.84% from last year. It's a modest increase, but as I stated earlier, in a non-revaluation year, we often do not expect growth, and a lot of the times we do see decreases. So this is actually a good thing. The modest increase could be attributed to increases in personal property, real property, and motor vehicles. All three of the lists went up. And as an example, 133 properties which are currently under deferral have added about 42 million to this year's real estate grand list. The top 10 taxpayers are the same as they were in previous years, with UI, Winstanley, and Yale coming in at number 1, 2, 3, respectively. The exempt grand list is approximately $8.5 billion, which now makes it 59.57% of the entire real estate grand list. To put this in perspective, currently the taxable grand list brings in about $294.5 million in revenue. Now, if we existed in a vacuum and the mill rate remained constant, this exempt property, if we taxed it, would create an additional $373 million in revenue. The current exempt grand list as it stands is about 40.57% from Yale University, 14.25% from Yale New Haven Hospital. The biggest increases in the exempts this year were municipal properties, as the Brookside Rockview area is being complete. Charitable organizations, as the Mary Wade Home and Chapel Haven, are working on projects. State college property, which would be anything going on at Southern, and private colleges, which would be work at Yale and Alders Magnus. So that is a brief overview, kind of a bird's eye view of the 2020 grand list, and I will open it to questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Poulin. Alderman Marchand.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind myself and colleagues that the 2020 grand list that you're speaking of this evening is the grand list that will be used to determine people's tax bills in July and next January.
Correct.
And that the new grand list that will come up after the revaluation will be for the following budget year, with like this fall being a crucial time for appeals and further information from residents to the agencies doing the reevaluation. Is that correct, Mr. Pullen?
The revaluation is just starting now, but prior to the setting that list in October, we will be doing informal hearings with taxpayers, which is even before the normal hearing process of the BAA. We feel there's no need to send them to the BAA if we can get the values right the first time.
Great, great. Okay. So for the purposes of tonight, which is really about, the theme tonight is looking forward and looking at the budget that's proposed to this board that we'll be talking about over the next several meetings. It's the 2020 grand list that you just briefly described. That's really relevant to our discussion in our deliberations over the coming weeks.
Correct.
And through the chair, if you could provide for us, like you have in past years, a brief write-up of the summary, that would be really
So noted. Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, moving right along. Is Alder Ernest Santiago with us yet? Alder DeCola, any questions for Mr. Poulin, the assessor?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All righty. Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. I just want to say that was a very high-level, thorough presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alder Festa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. Alex, what are the estimates of what's been removed from the grand list and what's been added to the grand list to make up that couple million? Are there big ticket items?
Hold on for 1 second. As was stated, part of the increases are attributable to assessment deferral projects, which were previously being exempted, but which are now on a schedule to phase out their exemption. So 42 million of that, which is majority of the real estate list, came from those exemptions diminishing. Other major, looking at this list, that's where the majority of the increases come from. Some of the other increases, there's big increases on the personal property grand list. That's just UI acquiring more personal property, even though there's over 3,000 personal property accounts. The majority of the value comes from the top accounts, one of which is UI.
Are you able to speak on which ones specifically have been phased in?
I mean, I would have to look at the list of all the phased in properties. If you would like to send you that, I could send you a list of every property that was phased in, but that's, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't tell you every property that was phased in.
Oh, that would be appreciated. Madam Chair, through you, if we could get that document, that would be appreciated. And then with the, do you also have the tax abatement totals?
Well, tax abatement would go through Maureen in the tax office, unless you are referring to assessment deferrals, which are, they're two separate things.
Yeah, I was looking for tax abatement, but now that you bring up the tax deferrals, if you have that information. And again, if you need to send it through Madam Chair, that is also, if you don't have it in front of you, that would be great.
I will send it through the chair.
And then just one more, do you know, will revals affect the assess based on sale price? Like there are some items that, some properties out there that were assessed low but sold high. Will the assessments be on the value, the sell price value of properties, or what will they be based on?
Well, the way that the revaluation works is that we look at cost of construction, which would be the cost approach. We also look at, for income producing properties, we look at their income and expense data, which we receive every year, which will be analyzed by the revaluation company. And we also look at all the sales that occurred in the last 2 years. What you've got to remember is that last set of values come from a revaluation from 2016. So a lot has changed in the last 5 years. So as you move further away from the revaluation, your values get further away from that 70% assessment ratio, which is where we're designed to be. So as we come upon the new revaluation, our job is to once again make it so that the assessments are 70% of what the actual values are. So to answer your question in brief, yes, we are looking at the sale prices, especially for properties which sold for more than we have them currently assessed.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's it. I will look forward to those lists that will review some of the properties that are now on board that had deferrals, so full revenue on new developments and all of that. I'll look forward to those documents. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, you can't be heard.
Perhaps the chair was calling on me since I'm next. I'm assuming that's what you're doing, so I'll just, if you nod your head or give me a thumbs up, then I'll go right ahead. Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Pullen, for your very thorough explanation and presentation. I don't have any questions at this time, though I reserve the right to come back after. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Am I being heard now?
Yes.
All righty, thank you. Moving right along to Alder Evelyn Rodriguez. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alder Hurt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time, but just to compliment Mr. Pullen on a thorough presentation on tonight. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Alder Decker, any questions for Mr. Pullen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be a question for you or for staff, but do we have in our handout somewhere a summary of this, or was that what Vice Chair Marchand was requesting through you?
Yeah, Vice Chair Marchand requested a written summary of everything Mr. Pullen said. So hopefully
Okay.
provide that for us.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing it. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Could you just state one more time, since I think I missed the exact number, the current proportion that is exempted?
The exempt grand list represents 59.57% of the entire real estate grand list.
Thank you, and that's roughly what it was last year as well. Yeah.
It's just a little bit less. Last year was 59.74. Now it's 59.57. So it's roughly the same.
Okay, thank you. I think that that, as our vice chair was saying, provides some important context for the rest of tonight's hearing. But that's the only question I have on this for now. But I look forward to seeing the written summary. So thank you for coming down here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Your volume's turned off again, Madam Chair. You still can't be heard, Madam Chair. Not yet.
Any better?
Now you're on.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, folks. Moving right along to Mr. Gormany on the budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Gormley, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. I did prepare a PowerPoint. If I can have share screen, I will quickly go through the PowerPoint for the committee. All right, can everyone see that? All right, thank you, Madam Chair and committee for the opportunity to give a budget overview. As Vice Chair Marchand mentioned earlier, what I will do is I will give a brief overview of the budget, and any detailed questions will be answered by myself and the department heads and the coordinators during the workshop. There are a lot of slides on here, but I think we'll stick to the most important slides on the budget development for the city. And I know there was some news this morning on the federal stimulus, so I'll probably just say one or two statements on how that impacts this budget. So again, that's just the org chart of the city. In this fiscal year, the mayor presented two budgetary options for the for the proposed year coming July 1st of 2021. What we did was we took a look at just various circumstances that impact the city's overall budget. One of the items that does not line up exactly with our budget process is the state budget, which definitely has an impact in this year on the city's finances. What we looked at were two different budget scenarios. We looked at a crisis budget, and what the crisis budget entails is basically what we would need to do if we did not get additional aid from the state and Yale University. The crisis budget incorporates a broad range of cuts in the city budget, including employee layoffs, closing of a library, closing of a senior center, closing of a firehouse, and eliminating additional vacant civilian and non-civilian positions. On the revenue side in the crisis budget, one of the main impacts is there would be a 7.75% tax increase. The Forward Together budget is the budget that we're working off of and that we're very hopeful, especially with everything that has passed out of the state legislative bodies regarding tiered pilot and other initiatives. The Forward Together budget will allow us to continue the current level of financial strategies in the current path forward that we currently have. Basically, what that means is we'll be able to maintain the current level of services and take significant steps as far as our pensions, healthcare, and other financial matters come into play. So again, this is basically from a dollars and cents standpoint on the difference between the two budgets. As you can see, the mayor's proposed budget in the crisis is a budget of $589.1 million compared to $606.2 million. The capital budget going into fiscal year 22 is currently proposed in the mayor's budget at $60 million, and we have grant anticipation of about $29.2 million. So all in between our operating costs, capital costs, and our anticipated grants in the mayor's crisis budget, we would be looking at a grand total budget of about $678.4 million. And in the Forward Together budget, we would be looking at about $69.5 million. So going over the next two slides, we'll just go over briefly our capital improvement plan, which is the $60 million. The $60 million plan is over 2 fiscal years. So if you split that in half, that's about $30 million a year. The previous 2-year cycle was the first time that we did the 2-year budgeting cycle, which saved the city additional funding as far as upfront costs related to borrowing, underwriters, and rating agencies, and a host of other cost measures. So again, we plan on going with that 2-year cycle again. We were able to lower the budget by about $10.7 million. So the first 2-year borrowing was at $70.7 million. This is at $60 million. As we look at the city's financial ability to borrow money, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to look at lowering the capital cost, but also maintaining services. So the overall budget will still maintain priorities of street trees, sidewalks, street reconstruction, and some additional funding for New Haven Public Schools repairs. It also adds in a new project for the broadband fiber, police body cam, dash cam, and equipment per the police accountability bill as well. So the next slide really just shows the overall bonding cost. Again, as you can see, the first 2-year cycle was $70.7 million. We are going down to $60 million and maintaining that $60 million in the mayor's plan. Again, when you get the budget submission, the plan is, you are not approving the plan, you're approving the borrowing. As we know, the plan can always change from year to year in any budget cycle. But the current proposed plan in the out years is to maintain that $60 million. So again, we have two budget proposals in front of you. And again, I will stress that, the administration's really going with the Forward Together budget. But again, we wanted to show what would happen if we didn't get that additional funding from Yale and the state. So as you can see in the mayor's proposed budget, the 2021 crisis budget would increase the mill rate to about 47.28. That was that 7.75% number I referenced earlier. In the Forward Together budget, it maintains the mill rate at 43.88 mils. So in the Forward Together budget, we would still be able to maintain the same mill rate that we currently have. And on another note that I did not note in this slide, in the crisis budget, while the mill rate would go up to 47.28, that would be on personal property and real estate. The motor vehicle mill rate would remain at 43.88 mils because the state does have a cap on the motor vehicle mill rate. This next slide is just a history of the mill rate since fiscal year 2007. And as you can see, the last two columns are the two proposed budgets. This is an example, and again, these are estimates with the crisis budget, what the average taxpayer would see in 4 examples here on the home value and taking their assessed value at the current mill rate and the proposed mill rate. So as you can see, at 140,000 assessed value, the taxes would increase by about $475 as an estimate on their tax bill for real estate. Mr. Pullen touched on the grand list during his presentation, but as you can see, the next 3 slides touch on the grand list. As he mentioned, we have about a $15.9 billion total grand list, where $6.7 billion of that is taxable, and that's where he mentioned the tax deferrals and everything else come into play. And that is how we derive our tax revenue for the city, is on that $6.7 billion taxable grand list. And then there's the portion that he talked about, which really applies to Yale University, Yale New Haven Hospital, state, nonprofits, and municipal property. That is about $8.5 billion, as Mr. Pullen mentioned. And again, that's about 59.7% tax exempt, which means we cannot collect on that, the value of that property. One of the city's issues that we'll get into in the next few slides is we really don't have the revenue growth to keep up with the city's fixed cost expenses. And part of the reason is, again, almost 60% of our property value is non-taxable. So again, in this example, even if 1 billion of that $8.5 billion became taxable, that would be an additional $30 million that the city would see in revenue. So that kind of gives you an example to the extent of why that value is important to the revenue growth of the city and why we need the additional assistance from the state and Yale. Again, the next slide just shows this is a 5-year history of the grand list, and this is the taxable portion. Again, I think it's clear that this is the taxable portion of how we derive our city tax base. And again, Mr. Pullen mentioned that, we did see an increase going from grand list 2019 to grand list 2020 in value. The next slide shows, this is from our municipal fiscal indicators. Unfortunately, this hasn't been updated. I get this information from the Connecticut Office of Policy and Management, but what you can see is even as of Grand List 2018, the city's exempt property value, and again, this is the property value compared to other cities and towns in Connecticut. As you can see, as of the Grand List 2018, we were almost double the value of what Hartford was. So I think that's important to note how our non-taxable value and property plays an important role in the city's revenue growth. So looking at the major revenue overview, and these revenue changes are reflected in both budgets. What you can see is, again, the grand list grew. We did reduce our interest income budget. Again, the last few years, we've seen great growth in our bank accounts, and we were able to generate revenue off of that growth. But I think with COVID over the last few years, and depending on where the pandemic goes, we have seen less growth. And you will notice that in this year's monthly reports, as we are way down on that particular budget for interest income. So we decided to lower it. Building permits was a was part of the gap that we've seen. As you can see, we go from 19.4 million to 13.6. Meter receipts and parking tags were started to be adjusted. I did testify at one of the previous finance committee meetings at how we really needed to get to a baseline level in parking meter receipts and parking tags. And what I mean by that is we have a certain growth that we've seen in the previous years, and that produced the baseline of revenue that we would collect. In the past 2 to 3 years, we've been budgeting about $7.1 million in meter receipts, but have not been meeting that budget. So the city obviously cannot keep budgeting that high number, and that number has to be adjusted. The same thing with parking tags as well. The other big item that was adjusted was our New Haven Parking Authority pilot. We did have an agreement with this fiscal year. And again, that was pre-pandemic on looking at the pilot. The Parking Authority was looking at giving us $4.4 million. And we had to adjust that back to the normal budget of $2.8 million, which is what we received in previous years. What is the major revenue difference between the two budgets? Again, I think one of the budgets you will see in the crisis budget relies on a property tax increase and distressed municipal aid, that was an additional $11.8 million that was in the governor's budget that we would see. In the Forward Together budget, as you can see, the property taxes remain level close to this year, plus the small increase that we see in the grand list growth. And we have a number for additional aid from the state and Yale. So that is the tiered pilot program plus what we are working on with Yale. Now, if the reason it's zeroed out in the Forward Together budget for distressed municipalities, if we got the tiered pilot, it's a good chance that we would not get the distressed municipal revenue from the state. So as far as the difference between the two budgets, that on the revenue side, that is the major difference between the two budgets, is property taxes and state aid, as you can see. The next few slides are really just charts and graphs on the city's actual revenue for state aid for education, state pilot property payment, colleges and hospitals, which as you can see, we were at our peak in 2015 in actual revenue, and then we started declining, which is money that the state, even though our exempt grand list grew, we started getting flat state aid in regards to colleges and hospitals. This is just a history of our building permits revenue. As you can see, we've had a few good years due to a lot of development, which is great in the city. The city has definitely seen a good economic development boom going on in New Haven, and we hope that continues in the out years as well. So getting to the expenditure side of the budget, I will be going through some of the major expenditure increases that the city's seen. As you know, we had a $66 million gap that started between revenues and expenditures. And I'll sort of explain some of that in the next few slides. Excuse me. This is just a chart of the budgeted positions. Again, I think as we continue to look at personnel and vacancies, it's important to note that as we continue to drop in personnel count, that work does not go away. That means we are relying more on our current employees to do more. Again, as you can see, we are at some of our lowest levels of actual employee count. So when we hear about cutting a department 10% or whatever the case is, that may mean lowering the personnel count even more because we're sort of at a bare bones budget already, especially when it comes to the FTE count for the city. And that's an important part as we eliminate vacancies as well, right? Because it's been vacant, but that work still has to get done by current employees. This is just a summary of some of the position and vacancy changes. A lot of these changes are really done in just the crisis budget. So again, as far as the police department, we eliminated 9 fully funded positions. That's just in the crisis budget. We eliminated 12 fully funded vacancies, eliminated dollar positions. So again, this is really just an overview of the position eliminations that took place in the crisis budget. Oh, sorry about that. One of the things that you will see that are in both budgets are while we did make 34 changes in positions, we did add 3 nursing positions and 2 sergeant positions within both budgets. One of the items that we add per a 2019 MOU with the fire department is that the mayor must propose 3 captains and a lieutenant position within the budget. So those are also included as well. And then our city clerk's office had 1 title change. So this slide is basically a summary of all the position changes. The next 3 slides basically outline the department budgets over time. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to include these is I broke this down by budget compares by function of different departments. So this first slide really looks at the overall what we call operational departments. So this is all the city departments with the exception of public safety, police, and fire. And what's important to note on this slide is that when you compare the actual budgets for fiscal year 16-17 to the crisis budget, you'll see that that budget has only gone up 7%. So that includes wages, overtime, whatever the case is, and operational, non-personnel. And when you look at the Forward Together budget, it's 10.7%. That is actually not a lot to go up in the budgets over a 5 to 6 year period as far as operational wise. And again, that's also correlating to in that same time period, we also cut a lot of vacant positions as well. So when we talk about departmental cuts or whatever, as you can see, this is a very important piece to look at, that there hasn't really been a lot of growth in city operations. There's not a lot of meat there to cut within actual city departments. The next piece is public safety and utilities and education. Public safety is obviously the biggest part of the city budget, and that's where we see a growth as far as departmental wise is in our public safety sector. But that is very common. That is within a lot of cities and towns as we look, is that public safety, which is primarily police and fire, are where the budget is going to grow from a personnel standpoint and from an overtime standpoint. So that type of growth is actually expected. The next slide really shows, this is where '16, '17, our pension, which includes our pension contributions plus our FICA and Medicare costs, was only at $52.5 million. Excuse me. In the crisis budget, it's at 83 million and at 84.7 million in the Forward Together budget. You see big growth in our employee benefits section as well, which is really our healthcare costs. That's the majority of our employee benefits costs. You see that grows from 83 million to about 95.1 million in the crisis budget and $97.3 million. So from a non-personnel section, as you can see, it's really the fixed cost in the city that's driving the increases in the city's budget. When you look at the overall city budget, which in fiscal year 16-17 was 523.3 million, it goes up to 589.1 million in the crisis budget and $606.2 million in the Forward Together budget. That's about 12.57% and 15.84%. Excuse me, 15.84% comparing the two budgets. That is very close to inflation. Inflation over that 5-year period was about 10.13% to 11% when you look at the consumer pricing index. So that, as you can see, there's really not a lot of room in the operational departments. What the city has seen the growth in is overall fixed costs, which is really what's driving a lot of the budget gap that you can see in the mayor's proposal. So again, these next few slides are really just charts and graphs on the different contributions between pension and medical. The departmental changes in the mayor's proposal, again, a summary of the crisis budget is closing the Mitchell Library, the Whitney Avenue Firehouse, and the East Shore Senior Center, eliminating 10 officer positions with the additions of 2 sergeants, and again, eliminating 5 firefighter EMT positions, but adding 4, which is required by the 2019 MOU. The crisis budget would also require us to do RIF, which is reduction in force, which would be layoffs, like I mentioned earlier before, and organizational restructuring. It also includes $2.8 million in debt service savings, which is not included in the Forward Together budget. The crisis budget includes flat funding the Board of Education, and the Forward Together budget actually adds an additional $3 million to their fund. And both the crisis budget really only sees a moderate increase in workers' compensation and healthcare, while the Forward Together budget increases the workers' comp and healthcare costs to at least get us to what we think we'll see, because healthcare costs especially are going to most likely go up at some point. It's just a matter of when that point is. And again, the Forward Together budget, which again, I think the administration is looking forward and working off of, is really eliminates most of the cuts to the city budgets and adds the funding to the Board of Education. So again, this is really a dollar and cents perspective of the difference in the two budgets. So what this slide does is it compares the fiscal year 21 budget, which is the current fiscal year that we're in, to the fiscal year 22 crisis budget and the fiscal year Forward Together budget. One of the main items, again, that we've seen an increase in was the pension cost. As you can see, the SURF pension was $22.6 million for fiscal year 21. The crisis budget increases that to 25.7. The fiscal year 22 Together budget increases that to 26.7. In the police and fire, where we've seen our biggest increase, this year's cost was 39.5 million, and the 22 crisis budget is 52.3, and the Forward Together budget is $53 million. What I will say, and just to make this disclaimer, is the crisis budget is the baseline for the ADAC payment. Let me be clear by that. The city has made 100% of the recommended ADAC payment. And the crisis budget that you see is the baseline. What the Forward Together budget would enable the city to do is make an additional contribution beyond what the baseline ADAC payment would be for fiscal year 22. Now, one of the things that was driving the increase also in the ADAC payment was we did lower the rate of return. We lowered the rate of return from 7.75% to 7.25% in both budgets as well. And again, that's looking at where the pension should actually be. And we've had numerous conversations on whenever you lower the rate of return, that's going to increase your actuarial defined, the ADAC payment in any year. One of the other things that's going to get in that I'm going to talk about in a few slides is we did also in police and fire add in a federal reimbursement of $4 million. That's about $2 million for each police and fire. We did increase the overtime cost for police from $7 million to $9 million. As you know, during this COVID pandemic, we've seen a huge increase in police and fire overtime. And again, I think at the last few finance committee meetings, we talked about the actual, what do those budgets actually need to be? And I think having the police budget at $9 million is a start. And again, the same thing with the fire. We increased the fire budget from $2.1 million to $4.1 million in both the crisis and the Forward Together budget. Healthcare cost was another area that we looked at. As you can see, I mentioned that there was a moderate increase in the crisis budget. It goes from 84.3 million to 85.2 million. In the Forward Together budget, where we are seeing that additional revenue that we need as a city, we are able to increase that to $86.8 million. And in workers' comp, we go from $7.5 million in the crisis budget, we go up to 7.9 million. And in the Forward Together budget, we go to $8.5 million. So this is really the selected major changes. I think this committee is going to hear a lot during the budget process and the budget testimony from the departments. The next few slides really go over a lot of what, a lot more in detail than that first summary slide I just mentioned. I will kind of leave that to the board to sort of review on their own. But this is really just a written summary of some of the items that I just talked about as well. So that's kind of a high level summary. Again, it's a lot of information to sort of take in. And I think as we go through the budget process, you know, we'll get a little bit more in depth with the actual city departments and what some of these cuts and everything mean. And again, I think one of the things that I want to stress is the administration is definitely looking at working at the Forward Together budget, but we also want to be prudent and show you what would happen if the city did not get the additional revenue that was needed from the state and from Yale. Now, at the earlier in my presentation, I did mention the news that came out this morning on the federal stimulus, that New Haven is slated to get $94 million based on the federal stimulus bill. I do want to iterate that we are still looking into that federal stimulus, but again, with federal funding, and a lot of us know, especially on the Board of Ed side, with the TIF grants, with community development block grant that the city deals with, we cannot supplant operating costs with federal funding. While the guidelines on this federal funding for $94 million that's coming to New Haven, we can basically use that for things that had an economic impact due to COVID. So for example, lost revenue is an example, right? We can actually look at the lost revenue that was due to COVID and apply that federal funding. But again, this is treated like a federal grant. There are guidelines to this funding. So that's why we cannot just say we're going to offset for 1 year $94 million of operating costs. That's not the way that this federal stimulus funding works, or with any federal grant for that matter. So again, I want to be clear that we are still looking at the guidelines, but the basic guidelines of the $94 million is the city is to use that funding based on the economic impact of COVID. And the way that would read is, we're looking at this fiscal year. What revenue have we lost during this fiscal year due to COVID, right? There's a certain time period that this federal funding goes back to. You know, how can we apply it in future years? Again, like public safety is one of the guidelines. But we cannot just use it to say that we're going to cover operating salaries in the finance department or anything like that. Again, there are strings attached to this federal funding that the city must abide by. And to be very frank, when we draw down the money, my office, the Office of Management and Budget, has to submit proof and reports and other areas that this money is being used as the guidelines intended it to be used for. So that was a lot of information, I know. I know we'll all have more questions during the budget testimony, but as always with the committee, I am here to answer any questions, Madam Chair, that the committee members may have, and as always available also off hours, you know, to talk about anything related to the mayor's proposed budget.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, Alder Marchand, would you like to start?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Marshad is not on.
I'd like to acknowledge Alder Kimberly Edwards that has joined us also. All right, we'll move on to Alder DeCola. Do you have any questions?
No, not at this time. There'll be more in the future.
Thank you, Alder DeCola. Alder Morrison?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard a lot of information. I will have further questions when the departments come, but I do have one. Mr. Gormley, you said a whole lot tonight. Can you please just go through real quickly the pension part again, not the whole thing? You said it was two differences. It was the difference between the two budgets, and you gave the number. Can you give that number again for me, please?
Absolutely. I will pull it up for you. But in the meantime, while I'm looking for that number, or the slide that had the number. So again, the takeaways from the pension are we lowered the rate of return on both the SURF and PNF from 7.75 to 7.25%. The crisis budget is the baseline. So that's the 100% of making the ADAC payment. So looking at the crisis budget, the SURF number went up from 22.6 million this year to $25.7 million in the crisis budget. The PNF number went up from 39.5 million to $52.3 million for PNF. Again, that's in the crisis budget. So that's 100% of what the actuarials have recommended. What the reason the Forward Together budget is different is because that budget enables us to put a little bit more money in beyond that 100% actuarial recommended contribution. So in essence, that's really the difference between the two budgets when it comes to the pension. Does that answer your question?
Yes, your
Okay.
last sentence captured it for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Alder Furlow?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to note that Alder Marshad has rejoined us, and I didn't hear whether or not Alder Festa had any questions before me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I did jump right past her name. Alder Festa, forgive me. Go ahead, Alder Festa. It's your
I
turn.
know you don't want to hear from me, Madam Chair, because you know I always have questions. Anyway, actually, it's a follow-up also to the pension. Are you at all concerned, Mr. Gormany, that the actuaries actually wanted it dropped to 7%?
So what we did was, this was a year for the experience study, and I'll keep this brief and can probably go over a little bit more when I do the finance testimony. But we did the experience, the actuarials did the experience study, and looking at some of the assumptions that they used in the experience study, we were able to look at, is 7.25% in a reasonable recommendation? You are 100% correct. Their first recommendation was to go to 7%. But again, we're looking at the city's financial ability to make that ADAC payment as well. So we realized that we needed to go down on the rate of return assumption. So I'm not concerned. We work with both pensions and the, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. But the folks who work on the pension numbers also, and we all felt that 7.25% was a reasonable rate of return and justifiable rate of return in lowering both PNF and SURF.
Can you just briefly explain what the experience study is, please?
Sure. The experience study is what the actuarials look at every few years. So we have things such as mortality tables, right? And that's basically life expectancy. For PNF, for police and fire, they look at what's the life expectancy of a cop and firefighter after they retire. Same thing on civilian. They look at the cost of living increases. They look at the language in union contracts when people can collect. So it's just like that type of data that is updated every few years for all municipalities, basically.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. And so I guess based on all of that information that the actuaries looked at, they thought 7% was best, but we could get by with the 7.25 in both of those budgets.
Exactly, correct.
Okay. Okay. I'm just going to move on because I'm sure there'll be more questions on pension stuff as we go along, but I'm going to go to the capital budget. What were the largest capital cuts made that you indicated?
So some of the larger, it was basically an across the board cut, to be very frank with you. Again, I think one of the things that we've been doing over the last 4 to 5 years is trying to lower the capital budget and really get to a realistic capital budget. I think we're closer now to that point of trying to only borrow what we retire in debt. And we normally retire between 29 and $32 million a year as far as principal debt. So I think this budget brings it closer to that goal, basically right at that goal of borrowing what we retire in debt. But to answer your question, it was basically across the board. I mean, we gave a goal to the coordinators to work with their department heads on coming into a particular capital budget, but still meeting the priority. So it was basically an effort by all departments.
Okay. I mean, we just got our budget book, so I will be looking at it more carefully and developing additional questions as we move on. But can you just give us an idea of how much for Board of Ed facilities? There was an increase, you said, to the Board of Ed. How much for that?
So in trying to work within that number, we did do two things within the $60 million number citywide. So we did increase their overall budget. And I apologize, let me just get it up for you. But I believe we increased their overall budget by about 500,000 as far as capital wise. And one of the things that we also did to give them more flexibility was we combined a lot of their line items into general improvements. And what that does is it gives a lot more flexibility to use. So instead of budgeting $200,000 in interior painting, interior exterior painting, for example, that can be considered a general improvement. So we said, let's not budget that particular line item by line item, but let's give flexibility to the money that they have to use. Now, they also did put in a redesignation request around the same areas. That redesignation request is basically moving money from smaller line items for projects that are going to be completed into general improvements for schools. So what we're really doing is trying to build up that pot of money to be flexible and to use to get some of these repairs for the school systems going. To give you a sense, in 1920, their 2-year budget was $13.6 million. Their budget for 21-22 as proposed is $15 million. So it was more than what I just said, but so we did really look at the Board of Education and the needs, especially for school repairs.
Okay. I'm just going to ask one more question and then yield to my colleagues, which is I noticed that for street sweeping, it's zeroed out on page 2-24. Are we doing away with street sweeping tags?
No. So what I tried to do in the revenue line item was really combine a lot of revenues. And again, that goes into what I talked about with the parking tags and getting to that baseline, right? So when you generally looked at the budget, there were really like 3 or 4 lines that made up tags. And that really, those 4 items came into a number that we just couldn't meet from a budget standpoint. So what I did was I threw everything into the number that we see as parking tags in the budget, which I believe is $4.5 million. So while that's zeroed out, the fee for street sweeping is still in the license permit and fee section. So we will definitely still be collecting that revenue. It'll just be going into that one generic revenue pot of tags.
Okay, so it's just consolidated.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Before I continue, I'd like to recognize Alders Smith and Sabin that have joined us. Moving right along now to Alder Furlow. Hi, Alder Furlow.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'm going to have probably 1,000 questions throughout this process, since this is the first time that I am on this committee during the budget, but I'm not going to ask them tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure how I can phrase this question, but looking at the definition of exemptions, do we conduct audits or evaluations to exempt property, to exempted property, to ensure that they still meet tax exemptions? Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gormany.
All righty.
Thank you, Alder Rodriguez. That's a great question. The answer to that question is yes. There's certain paperwork and guidelines that our assessor's office must have when it comes to exempt property. So we try to, with our staffing capacity, do to the best of our ability, look at those exemptions to see if they're really exempt. I believe Alex may still be on the call, so I'm not sure if he wants to add something to that.
Yes, I'm still here. What I will add is that the M3 exemptions in the state of Connecticut are quadrennial. So every 4 years, actually every year that someone has a new property that they want exempted, they have to submit for exemption through the assessor's office. And prior to November 1st, we have to look at their financials and determine whether or not we believe they are exempt. So we look at the use. Sometimes we'll actually go out and even do a field inspection. So it's not as though these things are exempted in perpetuity. We do have to approve them and ensure that they're still exempt.
I'll reserve other questions on this matter during our workshops. Thank you.
Thank you.
I kind of think that she's saying all the hurt. So, Madam Chair, I don't have any questions at this moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can read lips well enough to know that the chair said Alder Decker. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time. I have thoughts, but you will hear them as this process proceeds. So let's get to the public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're muted, Madam Chair.
Alder Marchand, you're next. Mr. Hayden, can they hear me?
Yes, they can, but I don't see Alder Marchand on the screen.
He's the last one on the queue.
Madam Chair, this is Alder Adam Marchand. I am currently sitting at the desk of our Director of Legislative Services. He's getting me set up on a different computer. I think in the interest of time, I will hold my questions for the actual departmental workshops later on. But I should be joining you soon once I'm set up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. Is there any other questions from the committee before we move on to the public hearings? As our vice chair has the list of everyone that has signed up for the public hearing, just bear with us a moment and we will proceed into the public hearing. Hearing from the public, he has a list, Alder Marchand has a list of everyone that has signed up to testify. Bear with us momentarily, please, while he gets set up.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Can we
ma'am.
take a 5-minute break?
Sir.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, okay.
I
He is
see him.
here.
Okay.
All right, Alder Marchand, can you hear us? I'm not sure if he,
His audio is connecting.
okay.
Should be good now, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lucas. Alder Marchand, are you able to hear us now? Can you hear us, Alder Marchand?
If you are satisfied with your message, press 1 to listen to your message. Press 2 to erase and re-record. Press 3 to continue recording where you left off. Press 4.
Phone is on.
Are you still there? If you are satisfied with your message, press 1 to listen to your message. Press 2 to erase and re-record. Press 3 to continue recording where you left off. Press 4.
Alder Marchand?
Are you still there? If you are satisfied with your message,
Madam Chair, can we take a 5-minute? Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute. You're still on
Technical
mute.
difficulty here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Alder Marchand, are you ready? Able to hear us?
He's trying to connect.
He's trying to connect. In the meantime, can we take a 5-minute break just to sort out our connection issues so we can proceed into the public testimony?
So, point of order, Madam Chair, is 7:32. Do you want us just to come back at 7:40 to make it clean? Just asking. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 7:40. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everyone. Please bear with us. We'll take a 5-minute break. 7:40, we will resume. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Alder Marchand. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I apologize for the technological goof ups, but I'm
Challenges.
in place and I'm ready to go whenever you reconvene us.
All right.
I have the list
Right.
of people signed up to testify, so I'll keep the queue.
Right. And are you
And
gonna
I'll look
start?
at the clock too to make sure we're adhering.
We said, yeah, we said a 5-minute little break, but it's like 7:35. Now that you're reconnected, I would like us to get started. But
well, it's up to you, Madam Chair.
Honorable colleagues, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yes.
My vice chair is now connected, and I would like us to reconvene. I know we said 5 minutes, but in the interest of time and we have the public waiting. Are we all still here?
Are you ready to promote people?
I am.
I'm ready when you are, Madam Chair.
Okay. Honorable colleagues, we are back in our meeting. At this time, we will start with the public testimony. Alder Marchand has a list of all of our public that has either submitted public testimony or is signed up to testify. I will now turn it over to Alder Marchand to start with the first person on our list. Alder Marchand, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, my apologies for the connection issues I've had in the meeting so far. I am now in a machine with a hard Ethernet connection. So hopefully that means no more interruptions in my service. We want to remind everybody that we're giving a 3-minute time frame for testimony. We encourage people to stay within that. I will be giving reminders as you approach the end of your time. Please to conclude your remarks. We have quite a list. It's over 30 people long. And so it's going to be important for folks to be concise and for the public to have patience as we transition from one speaker to another, which sometimes takes a moment. Our list, as I said, has quite a few people on it. The first 5 names are Kelsey Steele, Andrew Gearing, Evan Roberts, Diego Lopez, and Isabella Marin. So we will begin with Reverend Steele.
I do not see Reverend Steele in the queue. If you are on the phone, you would need to hit *9 to raise your hand so we know which phone number, but he is not in the queue by name.
Okay. Well, shall we proceed with the next person? And if Reverend
Yes,
Steele
please.
comes by later on, we'll bring him back into the queue.
Yes,
Andrew Gearing.
All right, we have 3 Andrew Gearing, so let's see which one is the correct Andrew Gearing. That is not Andrew Gearing. Let's see if this is Andrew Gearing. Is that you, Andrew Gearing?
That's me.
Perfect. All right. Let's take Miss Claudia out. And you are up, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Gearing. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening.
Hold on one second. I'm going to bring you in so you can put your video on. I think. Okay. There we go. He disappeared. Hold on. There you are. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair. Committee, Andrew Gearing, 43 Harbor Close. I'd like to talk about the New Haven Free Public Library. While the possibility of pilot funding gives us reason for cautious optimism, I was stunned by the threat of closing Mitchell Library to save less than $200,000 as proposed in the crisis budget now before this committee. I'm hoping others will testify tonight about the many resources that the library has continued to provide during the pandemic. I would just like to quickly mention a couple new resources that everyone might not be aware of, and I encourage you to share this information with your constituents. For one, the library has been beaming Wi-Fi off of Ives, Wilson, and Mitchell, allowing residents to access free Wi-Fi anywhere in a 3-block radius of these buildings. Every library branch also has Chromebook laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots that any resident with a library card can borrow at no cost. In other words, during this time of remote work and learning, the library has helped level the playing field in our very unequal city by ensuring free internet access for everyone. Our library won the National Library Medal in 2019. This means that New Haven's library system, through the incredibly hard work of our staff, has reached a level of national recognition that surpasses any other city department. The staff has accomplished this not because the library is so well funded, but despite that it is in fact severely underfunded. Our library receives only $4 million from the city. I've attached to my written testimony an excerpt from a January 2021 Connecticut Public Libraries report that shows how our library's total operating income of about $4.5 million stacks up against other libraries in Connecticut's other cities. It's not a flattering comparison. Bridgeport gets 7.8 million, Stamford gets 9.9 million, and Hartford gets 12.4 million. The town of Greenwich, with 60,000 residents compared to our 130,000.
1 minute left.
Library, $12.2 million. Just two other numbers for you to consider in comparison to the library's $4 million endowment: the more than $203 million surplus that Yale posted this year, and the $31.1 billion in Yale's endowment. There's no reason why New Haven should be so far behind Bridgeport, Stamford, and Hartford, the state's other three big cities in library funding, but we are. And as far as supporting its libraries is concerned, New Haven is lagging. For this reason alone, any further cuts to this already underfunded department are unacceptable. I urge you to emphatically reject the proposal to close any of our branch libraries or to reduce funding to our library, which already does so much with so little. Mitchell Library and the entire New Haven Free Public Library system is essential to equity and recovery in our city and need our support now more than ever. Thank you for your time and for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Gearing, for your testimony. Anyone wanted to ask Mr. Gearing a question? Moving right along. Thank you, sir. What is the next name, Alder Marchand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Evan Roberts is on the list.
Mr. Roberts, are you in?
Evan Roberts is not in the queue, sir. Nor is Diego Lopez or Isabella Marine. They all have provided written testimony, but are not in the queue.
Okay. So how about if one of those people decide they want to speak, they can catch our attention by raising their hand or putting it in the Q&A. So let's move on to Andy Zhao, Z-H-A-O, Andy Zhao.
I do not see Andy. You want to go through the next?
Sure. Sophie Kane, Isabella Morales.
Keep going, sir.
Abigail Layton.
Okay, keep going, sir.
Theo Hawks.
Do not have Theo in the queue. Keep going.
Sydney Bryant.
Something from Sydney.
Eric Lynn.
No, Eric.
Sarah McInnes.
No, sir.
Okay. All of those folks submitted written testimony, so perhaps it means that that is all they intend to do at this time. Moving on to people who are on the list who have not submitted written testimony. Kimmy Cushman.
She is indeed here.
Okay. Kimmy, if you can unmute and activate your camera and give us your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kimberly Cushman, and I'm at 44 Orange Street.
Proceed, please, Kimberly. Thank you.
So, thank you, Chair Hamilton and Vice Chair Marchand, and thank you to the members of the Finance Committee. As I said, my name is Kimmy Cushman, and I'm a graduate worker in the physics department at Yale University. I'm also a member of the coordinating committee of Local 33, the Union for Graduate Workers at Yale. On behalf of Local 33, I would like to share the statement on the relationship between Yale and New Haven's budget. We stand with the thousands of members of the Yale and New Haven communities demanding that Yale end its commitment to austerity and contribute to its fair share to New Haven. These budget proposals show loud and clear what the consequences of continued austerity will be. The best case scenario is maintaining a status quo that leaves far too many of our neighbors behind and continues to lock in generations of economic and racial inequality. The worst case scenario is almost too catastrophic to contemplate. These inequalities have only been exacerbated by COVID. But instead of rising to meet this moment, Yale, one of the richest universities on the planet, is choosing to double down on austerity. Leaders have refused to make significant new contributions to New Haven, even while the university receives a tax break that costs the city over $100 million per year. This is despite the fact that Yale has shockingly become more financially stable during the pandemic. For example, this year, the university reported that its endowment grew by 6.8%, bringing it to an all-time high of over $30 billion. Also, Yale has posted an operating surplus of over $200 million this year. On top of that, Yale received over $700 million in committed donations from 43,000 donors as part of its goal of raising $6 billion in its current fundraising campaign and their purported mission to improve the world today and for future generations. As Local 33's research has shown, Yale's behavior this year fits a long-term pattern of robust endowment growth mixed with austerity policies.
1 minute.
Thank you. Since 2013, Yale has underspent its own endowment spending rule by nearly $650 million. That means that even playing by Yale's own rules, there's more than $500 million at Yale that Yale has hoarded in less than a decade. We must remind Yale that austerity is a choice. Yale has the resources to contribute its fair share to New Haven. And because of the massive tax break it receives every year, it has the obligation to contribute more. By contributing its fair share to New Haven, Yale could be acting on its own proclaimed commitment to education and sustainability through providing New Haven with resources to better fund public schools and sustainability initiatives in the city, which could simultaneously generate good jobs for New Haven. These budget proposals show that we can't wait any longer. Local 33 joins our allies to demand that Yale contribute its fair share. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on our list.
Anna Word
is here.
Alder Hamilton, did we recognize Alders Sabin and Smith?
Yes, we did. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Good evening, Anna Hurd. May I have your name and address for the record, please? And you can unmute. Anna Word, sorry.
No worries. Yes, hi, my name is Anna Word. I live at 17 Nickel Street in Ward 9.
Please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. My name's Anna, like I said. I'm a biomedical researcher at Yale and a member of Local 34 and of Sunrise New Haven. Sunrise is a grassroots climate and environmental justice group fighting for a Green New Deal. The Green New Deal assures a just transition to a future in which everyone has the right to a green job that pays a living wage, affordable housing, quality healthcare, clean air and water, and a livable climate. All of these things are also priorities in the Board of Alders legislative agenda, and I thank them for recognizing these issues as important to our city. However, right now, Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital are preventing our city from making progress on these extremely important issues. They are hoarding their wealth, paying only $15 million of the $157 million in property taxes that they should owe to the city. And this despite the university posting an operating surplus of more than $200 million even during the COVID-19 pandemic. 51% of the children in the Hill live in households that fall below the poverty line, and 25% of residents in Fairhaven, aged 18 to 64, do not have health insurance, even as the pandemic rages on. I'm sure that you can imagine the profound negative effects this has on their access to healthcare. The fear and anxiety I, and I'm sure many of you, have experienced during this pandemic has often been overwhelming, but because I work at Yale and because of the hard work of Local 34, I have free, high-quality health insurance. To not have reliable healthcare is a danger that I do not have to face, nor should anyone, pandemic or no pandemic. As climate change progresses and our world warms, infectious diseases like COVID-19 will likely become more prevalent, and we may even see more frequent pandemics like the one we are currently still experiencing a year later. People in New Haven need low-cost quality healthcare. How can Yale University claim its mission to improve the world today and for future generations if they don't choose to contribute to New Haven
One
here?
more minute.
How can Yale New Haven Health claim to be putting patients and families first and valuing all people when they will not pay their fair share in taxes to support New Haven and its communities of color like the Hill and Fairhaven? It's past time that Yale gets away with not paying property taxes. We know how to improve New Haven. Investing more money in good things like healthcare, jobs, housing, all in a green way, and other things that New Haven neighborhoods themselves want. That way we can work on environmental justice,
30
and
seconds.
economic justice, and racial justice all at the same time. Yale must contribute more to New Haven, starting with helping to ensure that our community is able to rebound from this pandemic. And I'm here today to stand alongside other groups and unions demanding more shared prosperity in New Haven, not just for Yale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Next on our list.
Gina Bingham. Gina Bingham.
Is not in the queue at this time.
Not here? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. Vicky Bloom.
Vicky is not here.
May I interrupt you, gentlemen? I'd like to recognize Alder Jill Marks that has joined us also while we call the next person.
Alana Irvin.
Alana is here.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Alana Irvin. I reside at 302 York Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
Good evening, Alana. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you so much. My name is Alana. As I said, I'm a student at Yale involved with New Haven Rising and the Yale College Democrats, and I'm here to stand in support of the many calls for Yale to increase contributions to the city, especially in light of the proposed crisis budget for this upcoming fiscal year. Health and equity and vibrant communities in the city benefit everyone, including Yale students, professors, affiliates, and it's in Yale's best interest to contribute to the city. However, the university has neglected to pay its fair share time and time again. And this year, that could result in higher taxes for community members, the loss of the library's abundant resources, and less support for the people and programs that make this city so great. As the daughter of 2 public school teachers back in my hometown, I know how frustrating it can be to see private education institutions comfortably providing students with regular testing, PPE, and tools for virtual learning, while public school teachers and students are not provided with the resources that they need to be healthy and successful. Yale has the resources to invest in the health and well-being of public school teachers, community members, and students living in the city. And it's pivotal that Yale contributes its fair share to allow increases in funding for the Board of Education with the Forward Together budget. During this crisis especially, we are able to see the interconnectedness of Yale and New Haven. Our health and safety depend on each other, and especially now, Yale leadership cannot continue to ignore the harm that the institution is causing New Haven, and subsequently its own students and faculty. This crisis should be a wake-up call for Yale leadership. There is no better time to make a lasting and long-term change than now. And with the risk of high taxes and the elimination of valuable community centers and resources, Yale cannot continue to ignore community voices. I thank you all for your work calling for Yale to invest in the city. And from a student perspective, it's an incredibly high priority that Yale responds to your efforts and supports leaders in New Haven. Thank you again for your time and commitment to the city, and I look forward to hearing more on this issue.
Thank you, Alana. Moving right along, next name on our list.
Madam Chair, I'm going to name the next few people just so the folks can be ready.
Okay, go right ahead.
Lizzie Donius, Madeline Ranges, Josh Van Heusen, Rachel Schmidt. So next is Lizzie Donius.
Hello.
Good evening, Elizabeth.
Hi. I'm
Name
Liz-
and address for the record, please.
Sure, Lizzie Donius, Elizabeth Donius, 99 Woodbridge Avenue.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. I'm going to start by quoting a much wiser New Havener than myself, Elsie Chapman, who has served as the chair of the library board and foundation in the past. And this is from her speech accepting the Noah Webster Award last month. The New Haven Free Public Library is a visual representation of democracy. I've, Elsie, always considered it the great equalizer in our community, because no matter your economic situation, your ethnicity, your political views, your sexual orientation, your age, your religion, whether you are looking for a job or are currently a CEO, whether you have a home or are homeless, the NHFPL welcomes you. We know that the times in which we currently find ourselves are among the most testing in recent history. These are times when libraries, these engines of literacy and education, matter more than ever as places of reading, thinking, learning, and growing. We must continue to value the fact that the New Haven Free Public Library is free. We must continue to value the fact that the New Haven Free Public Library serves all. We must continue to value the fact that the library is a highly trusted institution rooted in the neighborhoods it serves. And we must continue to value the fact that our library is central to the health and vitality of the greater New Haven community. Now back to me. The New Haven Free Public Library won the 2019 National Medal for Museum and Library Science, the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries that make significant and exceptional contributions to their communities. The 5 thriving branches of the New Haven Free Public Library reach every demographic in our city every single day, and we reward them with reduced hours, unstable funding, and now the threat of closure. We should aim to invest in and grow our libraries into full-time, fully funded, thriving community centers they are well on their way to being. Even with cold, hard budgeting glasses on, this is a baffling suggestion. If you compare the New Haven Free Public Library line item in the crisis budget and the Forward Together budget, the difference is $188,000. That is 3/10,000ths of the city budget. As a person whose professional focus is the economic vitality of the commercial center of Westville, I struggle to begin to calculate the economic damage of an abandoned city library building occupying several acres in the center of the village on the grand list property surrounding.
30 seconds.
It would be exponentially higher than 200 grand. Likewise, fully funding our libraries and parks for that matter would undoubtedly have a high return on investment. The examples of this abound in cities all around us. Grand list things I know randomly from the last 2 months. Upper Westville townhomes sold for $21 million, more than double their last assessment. And from January 8th, this is both from the New Haven Independent, thank you, Tom Breen, Westville Village apartments sold for $50 million, $12 million more than their valuation.
Please wrap up.
Okay. Threatening to close a library branch for a savings of 3/10,000ths of the city budget, even if it is only a worst case scenario, is incredibly damaging. More from Yale, yes, and more from the state, but don't come for the library. It paints the library as a luxury, and if we do not respect the sacred role the libraries play in our city, democracy, and public life, our libraries will be forever undervalued, underfunded, and someday underperforming. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your passionate words. Next on our list, Alder Marchand.
So next on the list is Madeline Ranges. And I would just remind
not with us any longer?
within 3 minutes. No Madeline Ranges?
No.
Okay.
Next person.
Josh Van Hoosen.
There's no Josh.
Okay. Rachel Schmidt.
No Rachel.
Ian Scogard.
Ian is here.
Good evening, Ian. Can you unmute, please?
Yes, good evening.
Name and address for the record?
Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee.
Mr. Scogard, why don't you give us your name and address before you read your
I'm going to, yes, my name is Ian Scogard. I live at 42 Cleveland Road in New Haven.
Thank you.
I'm a 20-year resident of the city, 25 years, but 20-year homeowner and taxpayer in the city. I remember the first budget hearing last year. COVID-19 was just appearing in the United States, but the breadth and extent of the crisis was not yet clear. Even then, we knew our city was in crisis. The city assessor, Mr. Alex Pullen, reported that 60% of New Haven's real estate was tax exempt. He showed that the lion's share of this real estate was owned by Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital. These two organizations own over $4.7 billion of tax-exempt real estate. The city's total taxable real estate was only $5.7 billion. A year later, this enormous tax exemption continues to leave the Alders and the mayor in an impossible position: cut city services, raise taxes, or do both. Pandemic has only made this crisis more pressing. Given the suffering in our city today, it's clear that we need to expand city services, not reduce them, and lower taxes, not raise them. We could do this if Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital simply pay their fair share like the rest of us. When it comes to New Haven, Yale does not deliver like one of the world's best universities. Yale University made a jobs commitment to our city, but it failed to honor this commitment. In a hearing just months before the jobs agreement deadline, the university was hundreds of jobs behind the goal in its agreement. Residents in neighborhoods of need Yale has not hired could have been working throughout the pandemic, and their children would have had more stable housing and a more promising start in life. But Yale failed in its commitment, and these families have It's now been over a year of asking Yale to be a partner in our city's finances, and still President Salve has refused to make any contribution that comes close to the tax break this university receives from the city. Even if the mayor's more ambitious budget is adopted and funded, Yale will be doing far too little. New Haven needs transformation, a true change of heart, not tweaking the status quo. So I will ask, ask when will Yale President Peter Salve begin to care enough to take the actions that are commensurate with the urgency of this moment? When will he recognize the widespread suffering in our city and act according and by working harder to end segregation in New Haven? When will he treat New Haven with respect by deciding Yale has a great responsibility to New Haven after having benefited so much from massive tax breaks for so many years? By working together, New Haven could be the city that actually overcomes the legacy of redlining and the history of racism. New Haven could be a model in sustainability, enter the era of severe climate change. New Haven could be safer and healthier, a city on a hill. President Salve could have this legacy of being a global leader in community university relations. But so far, Yale has not shown.
Your time has passed. Please.
Formidable challenges in that community. It's a responsibility to continue to engage them until they agree to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Moving right along, next name on our list, Alder Marchand.
Yes, I will call that person in a moment. I just want to remind people that we're asking folks to stay within 3 minutes. I've read a number of these testimonies ahead of time, and if it's more than one page, it's more than 3 minutes. So summarize. The testimony is great, and if you submit it to us in writing, then we can have it verbatim. But we are asking people to stay within 3 minutes if they can. The next person on the list is Rebecca Frazier.
Hey, good evening, Ms. Frazier.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Alders, for hearing me tonight. My name is Rebecca Frazier. I reside at 178 Willard Street in the Westville neighborhood. And I'm pleased to hear that many tonight are sharing their broad perspectives about why it's important to fund our neighborhood library branches. I agree with everything that has been said so far, especially that which was voiced by Lizzie and by the Yale alumni, calling on Yale to fund far more than they've been willing to. But I'm here to put this issue into the context of a local artist. Westville is the artsy neighborhood in the city, as many of you know. And what you may not realize is how hard artists have been hit since the pandemic. I and my colleagues have lost one gig after another, and many of us, including myself, do not qualify for the PPP funding that has kept so many small businesses afloat. As an author with 4 published books, I have found great relief from the Mitchell Branch Library, both before and after the pandemic. It's been a great opportunity to share my work with the local audience through public readings and events at the Mitchell Branch. And prior to COVID, I was talking with the librarian there who's since moved to the Ives branch to plan writing workshops, which would have filled a dearth in the community because there are very few workshops for writing anything other than poetry, and also would have allowed me to receive fair compensation for my contribution to the community. And then the pandemic happened and that opportunity went away. But I have benefited from the library since then. Like so many others in the community, the free Wi-Fi hotspots have been an invaluable resource to me in continuing to operate my author business. And I was looking forward to being able to offer readings once the library opens again. It would be devastating
1 minute.
that I could not do that at my local library branch. And I also consider the number of people in this community who may not have access to a car, for whom it would be very difficult to get to another branch to take advantage of those services, whether they're an artist or a resident of Chapel Haven or anyone else in the community. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Frazier. Moving right along.
Madam Chair, next on our list is Jim Congdon.
Jim is not with us, Mr. Vice Chair.
Not with us, okay. Susan Klein.
Susan Klein is not with us.
Katie Jones.
Katie Jones is with us.
Yeah. Hello, good evening. Blessings, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
Are you able to be on camera, Katie?
I can, sure.
Thank you. And when you get on, your name and address for the record, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Catherine Jones, and I live at 310A Alden Avenue in New Haven, Connecticut. And I'm here to yes, in defense of the library for sure. I'm amazed at the absurdity of this item on the crisis budget proposal. And I just have to wonder what else is going on to occupy our energy and time and attention defending what many of us, and as people have named already, can kind of consider a miracle that is the New Haven free public library system. The first and most visible essential function of the library, in my experience, has been seeing it as a place for youth and all the resources that it offers, folks seeking employment, and community members and collaborators of all kinds, including myself, to utilize the library. I'm very grateful to folks who are organizing and calling Yale to pay up after centuries of theft and abuse of folks on this land. And Yale obviously has a history of along with these exploitative institutions. It would be great to see that flip, but even if they don't this time, there's no reason for the library to be at stake. Also, I'm concerned that once again, equating police with public safety or public health is up here without much context or analysis. And making that equation is misguided and dismissive of reality and much research that shows public safety is most dependent on mutual aid supports, access to housing, food, education, and of course, freedom of movement, which I have seen a lot of times the police doing surveillance and messy, harmful jobs that that actually restrict people's safety. So I just want to say, defund the police, and if that's too drastic for some folks to fathom, look to other cities and studies that have showed how effective people-led initiatives and support systems have mitigated crises, and the actual harms and detriments of letting these historically unjust institutions assume permanence and priority without a challenge. You know, instead of, yeah, it's just outrageous to me that even with the proposed police cuts in this crisis budget, that still that the library would be on the line. So I would say that's an easy line adjustment. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everybody who cares for the people in this city, for real. And I just hope you all stay well and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Have a blessed evening. Next on our list, Alder Marchand.
Yes, Madam Chair. And before I list the next few names, I just want to remind people that if you haven't already signed up to testify and you wish to testify, you can always raise your hand by going to using the Zoom tools. You may also put a note in the Q&A that you wish to testify. And I do see a couple of hands being raised. Next on the list is Heather Powell and Scott Dworkin. I believe they sent written testimony. Are they here, Mr. Lucas?
They are indeed not, sir.
They are not.
Correct.
Richard Canalori also sent written testimony.
Richard is here.
He is, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Canalori. Do you want to unmute?
Yes, I'm unmuted now. Thank you.
Name and address for the record, sir.
Richard Canalori, 36 Harbor Close, New Haven. Lifelong resident of New Haven. Taught at Sheridan Middle School for 20 years or so. Lived on Emerson Street, walked to the Mitchell Library my entire life. And as a teacher in New Haven, I want to just say that the Mitchell Library is the center of New Haven, of Westville. It is the heart of Westville. It's the soul. It's all the feeder schools that come to the Mitchell Library. When the Mitchell Library was designed, it served the purpose of having every school in Westville, Beecher, West Hills, Edgewood, Davis, all within walking distance of the Mitchell Library. Donald Mitchell, the person who Mitchell Library was named for, designed Westville. He laid out all the streets in Westville: Alden Avenue, McKinley Avenue, Whaley. They were all laid out by Donald Mitchell, who wrote a book called My Farm at Edgewood, and it describes the development of Westville. If you go online, I did a unit when I taught at Sheridan. I did a unit called The Development of Westville. It talks about Donald Mitchell. It talks about Westville. It talks about how that area, and specifically the village, was designed so that people had access to the church, to the library, to the fire department, to the right in that central spot. It is literally and figuratively the heart of Westville. It is the soul of Westville. To take away the Mitchell Library would be a disaster. It was a shame when the original Mitchell Library was torn down before people understood what tradition was like. But I just have to say that I hope that the committee will look at the development of Westville. We'll look at what that library means to the people of Westville. I heard the business person talking about the arts. Without culture, New Haven is nothing. That library provides culture. I'm now I now live in the Hill, and we love We love going to the Wilson Library. So libraries in general are just an amazing thing. And they're no longer just a place to take out books. They're cultural centers. There are meetings there all the time. There are story hours for young children. Please make sure that library stays the way it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Canalori.
You're welcome.
Moving right along. Next on our list, Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next, Lenny Spieler. I think he was just going to do written testimony. We don't see him. Remedy Sharif.
Do not see Mr. Sharif.
You do not see?
Correct.
I can't hear you, Mr. Lucas.
Sorry.
Michelle Peralta.
No Michelle, sir.
Thank you. Lorena Mitchell.
Do we have Lorena?
There, number 33.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
May I have your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lorena Mitchell. I live at 93 Pearl Street. Thank
You may
Madam
proceed.
Chair. Thank you, members of the Finance Committee. I am a member of the Safe Streets Coalition of New Haven. We are a transportation advocacy group in our city. And I'm asking the Finance Committee and the Board of Alders to prioritize improved transportation and infrastructure to ensure the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit riders on our streets. I appreciate the many educational, public health, safety, employment challenges that we've heard about this evening from other residents. So thank you so much for your time and your leadership. As you likely know, 13 members of our community were needlessly killed by motorized vehicles while walking or biking last year. And unsurprisingly, these traffic deaths are more likely to happen in low-income neighborhoods and Black and Brown neighborhoods. Since 2017, there have been 437 vehicle crashes that resulted in either serious injury or death on our streets. And to be clear, it's not just pedestrians and cyclists who are killed and injured. Drivers are dying and being harmed as well. These life-threatening incidents are completely preventable and are encouraged by infrastructure that is designed for the convenience of high-speed motor vehicles, rather than streets that support people who walk, who bike, and who take public transit around New Haven. I am an essential worker. I've been commuting daily to the Department of Veterans Affairs in West Haven. Like 30% of my fellow New Haveners, I do not own a car, so I rely on a combination of walking, biking, and public transit for my daily commute. On my way to the hospital, I moved through two notoriously dangerous intersections in New Haven, South Frontage in York and Columbus Ave and Ella T. Grasso Boulevard. Whether I'm on foot, my bike, or in a bus, I fear passing through these intersections due to the ubiquity of reckless driving and speeding cars and the lack of infrastructure for non-drivers. I'm asking the committee, the Board of Alders, and city officials to prioritize the many simple and often inexpensive improvements we need now to make our streets safe for all residents. From better lighting on Whaley, to sidewalks and sufficient pedestrian crossing time at Columbus and the Boulevard, to a marked bike lane at York and Frontage, residents have spoken, traffic engineers have weighed in, our esteemed city staff at TTC and city engineering know what needs to be done. It's incumbent on the city and the Board of Alders to ensure these essential projects are funded and completed, so we do not continue to lose members of our community to completely preventable traffic violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorena. Have a blessed night.
Thank you, you too.
Next on our list, Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have information that Remedy Sharif is indeed here, although perhaps on a device differently named.
All righty.
Remedy Sharif. Mr. Lucas is locating the individual.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm very sorry. Remedy Sharif, Hamden, Connecticut. So I was raised in New Haven, Connecticut, all my life pretty much. Thank you. I had some technical difficulties. I am the executive director of outreach for Ice to Beef and a key leader for New Haven Rising. I work with youth who are at risk of committing gun violence daily. It is time for us to start recognizing the connection between racism and gun violence, which are the obstacles that cause frustration and anger. The violent crime rate in our city closely follows the unemployment rate. Our youth need more mental health resources and better funded schools. Yet Yale University has not fulfilled the hiring commitment that it has made to New Haven, while the combined real estate tax break for Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital cost New Haven $157 million. The time is now for us to call a spade a spade. The time is now to recognize Yale as following 400 years of oppression and brutality upon people in our city. How can we lay in our beds and call ourselves conscious thinking people and not waging war against oppression? And that means in various ways. We have to fight. It is time to stand up and fight. How can we call ourselves the richest nation in America, Yale being one of the richest institutions in America, yet we have so many homeless people. We have so many children that are dying from gun violence, and Yale is not paying their costs and pulling their weight. $157 million tax break that Yale could pay. This is beyond the scope of imagination when we're talking about what one institution can do to relieve and help the lives of so many people that are suffering in our great city. We have a great city with rich history.
1 minute.
The Black Panther Party was in New Haven, Connecticut, and so many other great things that New Haven has led our beautiful country in. So I'm just speaking on behalf that how can we do anything else but stand up and tell Yale it's time to pay up, it's time to pay due and pay forward what they know that they need, what they know that they owe, and what they know they need to do, and that is help the citizens here in New Haven, Connecticut. Thank
you. Thank you, Mr. Sharif. Our next person on the list is Ethan Rodriguez Torrent.
Ethan is no longer with us, sir.
Emmett McMullen.
Emmett is no longer with us, sir.
Okay. Andy Gardner.
So Andy early. Andy is no longer with us, sir.
John Jessen.
Yes.
I believe he may have misunderstood, given that there he is. Here we go. We see your tile, Mr. Jessen, but we're waiting to see your face and hear your voice.
Okay. We'll leave him there. He may have walked away. So let's keep it rolling, sir.
Okay. Tina Menketti.
is indeed with us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Tina Manchetti. I actually live in Hamden, but I'm here to speak on behalf of my students at Chapel Haven Schleifer Center. I'm the art director. I've been there for 25 years. We've utilized the Mitchell Library the entire time I have been on the faculty there. And for those of you who don't know Chapel Haven Schleifer Center, it's a nonprofit school for cognitive and social challenged young adults. It is a residency school. So we have approximately 80 students that are living on campus at 1040 Whaley Avenue. And once they graduate our program, they're placed in the neighborhood surrounding Mitchell. So we've got over 150 graduates that are placed and live around the Mitchell Library and around our campus, which is on Whaley, Emerson, and Phillip. So we utilize the Mitchell Library so much. It's such a hub of activity. It's a sense of community for our students. It's the heart of the neighborhood. They gather there, they use the internet. A lot of these students don't have the ability and the access to the technology and computers that they do at the library there. It's just, it's a real gathering place for them as a neighborhood. They volunteer there. We have maintained the gardens. We've maintained the lawns, the patio spaces. We have volunteers that have worked in the Mitchell Library. So they've worked with the children. They've worked with just putting books away and helping other students that do go to the Mitchell. We've had our annual art shows there every year. Sharon was always our biggest advocate when she was there. The students just have such a sense of pride and purpose when they're there. And so they attend all the events. They go to the movies, the music performances. They look forward to all of that. And it's just a real hub, and it would be such a hole in the heart of the neighborhood if Mitchell closes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we cannot hear you, but I will call on the next person.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
There you go.
Thank you.
Anthony Allen.
And you're even under time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
No Anthony Allen, sir?
No Anthony Allen. Okay. Ravina Michelson.
Okay. No Miss Michelson?
I saw Andrew Gearing's hand raised again. I don't know if he was wanting to testify again or if one of the other two people with his name was wanting to testify, but the hand has since gone down.
Okay. We did bring in that Andrew Gearing, and they have not unmuted or turned on their video. So I'm going to presume it's the original. Back to you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, we have gone through the list. I think it would be appropriate at this time to make the final three calls for further public testimony.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Marchand and Mr. Lucas. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on the assessor's presentation or the management and budget presentation this evening? Anyone from the public that would like to speak on any of the items presented so far this evening? And for
Madam
the
Chair, perhaps I should just remind folks that if they do want to testify, they can raise their hands using the participant function in Zoom. They could also put a note in the Q&A
right.
saying that they would like to testify. And Mr. Lucas, you could remind the folks on the telephone, what's the star sequence they should push to raise their hand?
*9.
*9?
Right.
Correct.
So perhaps we give just one moment to see if any of our guests this evening decides to do one of those things.
We have one.
Okay,
All righty. So,
we've done
this-
2 calls. Perhaps we do the third.
okay. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on any of the items presented this evening?
We do have
Hearing
one.
none.
We have one. Michelle,
sorry?
we have one.
Okay.
Michelle.
Hi. I don't have my video on, but I hope that this is still okay.
Can I have your name and address, Michelle?
Michelle Peralta, 1275 Chapel Street, in the Dwight neighborhood.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that there's have been so many testimonies this evening that have spoken to what the library means to them. And I would just like to chime in as a former public librarian to give perspective on the devastation that happens when a community's library closes. I am not a current public librarian with the city, I should specify, but I have experienced firsthand and have seen what happens when a community gets cut off, and it's irreparable. And it's not just the loss of access to a physical space or the books in the library. It's that it's a loss of community. It's the fact that so many of the services that a library provides are not provided by any other agency within the city. And so it's those services that also get lost. And that whole population is also lost to the librarians. We can no longer help those people. And so it's a loss on so many different levels. And I know I've heard all of the things about what libraries have come to mean in the 21st century, that people no longer read books, that you can find everything on the internet, and that they're becoming increasingly obsolete. But I think, from all the testimonies this evening, that the library is more than just the things that are in it. It's so much more than the actual, number of number of books that are being circulated. And I think that cities are constantly underfunding and undervaluing their public libraries, and that
1 minute.
that city budgets are constantly being balanced on the backs of their public libraries. And so I would implore all of the elders to reconsider that there are other means. I know that there will be difficult decisions that need to be made this year with the budget, but there are other agencies that the public library is constantly being asked to do more with less. But what are the other agencies that can do with less? And that's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for your testimony. We are grateful. Thank you. I'm going to ask again if there's anyone that did not speak that would like to give public testimony at this time. Mr. Lucas and Alder Marchand, do we have any other hands or see anyone else from the public?
No, one hand
One hand.
One,
from someone on the phone.
okay. Do we know who that person is?
She or he will have to announce her or him.
Caller, can you unmute and identify yourself, please?
So, you have unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tennille Murphy. I currently reside at 38 Dayton Street, New Haven, in the Westville area. So I just wanted to speak as, you know, on the behalf of being a resident in the Westville neighborhood for over 20 years. I've owned my home, and I've also raised my daughter in this neighborhood for over 20 years. The library has been like a vital resource for myself and my family, and also as a business owner. I just remember the times when I was going to school for my bachelor's and I didn't have access to internet or computer problems, and it was in walking distance for me to use the library and do my studies. Also, just walking my daughter there to have access to, you know, books and use the computer and also other programs that have been going on. But also as a business owner, I use the library just to walk children near for staying in play groups. I've used it as a community center where I host cooking classes. So it's detrimental that the library will stay in the community and thrive. You know, there's not many resources for the youth in this side of the town. So, you know, we're just really asking, how could we, you know, look at this budget? How could we actually, you know, get together and have Yale pay what's due to us, so that resources like the library won't be, you know, stripped out of communities where, like for myself, single mothers need it, or any other business owners or just the youth that need it. So I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Alder Hamilton, we cannot hear you at the moment. No, we can't hear you. But I think what you're trying to say is, would anybody else from the public wish to testify on any of the items, the budget, on the transfer, the items that are before the committee? And as we wait for anyone to respond, we just remind people, we do have, yes, Mr. Ethan Rodriguez Torrent, who left, is now back.
Okay. Mr. Ethan, can you unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Your name and address for the record, sir.
Ethan Rodriguez Torrent, 38 Crown Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of unconnected things about the budget. The first thing is I absolutely agree with everyone who said that cutting a library to save $100 or $200 or $300,000 or whatever it is absolutely a bad deal and shouldn't be in either budget. The second thing I wanted to just suggest is, I know that there's been a lot of talk about how, you know, the property tax exemptions are written into the state constitution, and there's really little we can do about that. I'm wondering whether we could work with our partners in the state legislature to talk about better defining what constitutes an exempt property, because I know that, for example, Yale operates a lot of essentially just houses that they rent to tenants and exclusively rent to Yale students, and those are exempt as well because they're exclusive to Yale students, which not only takes housing off the market for the rest of us, but also creates further exempt property, you know, under Elm campus or whatever it's called. So I wonder if there's things we could do to, maybe it's just nibbling around the edges, but just to like massaging the definition of what constitutes exempt property that wouldn't, go contrary to the Constitution and to the exemptions written into the Constitution. And then I guess my third question is, it seems like the largest portion of the city's budget is consistently going to obligations having to do with union contracts, specifically ongoing obligations like pensions. And there's always a fight about, how much the city should be putting in every year toward pensions, but a really large portion of the budget goes toward pension. And it seems to me, and I've read that other cities have been successful with this, that we should be including the public as a stakeholder and representatives from the public. So not from the city government or from the union per se. Thank you. But representatives from the public as a stakeholder in future union renegotiations, because I think that the public has a vested interest in that being as the largest line item in the city budget. And, members of the union themselves have a vested interest in the city staying solvent. So I think that should be part of the discussion going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ethan, for your testimony this evening. Anyone else that we might have missed that would like to testify at this time? Anyone else from the public that we might have missed that would like to give public testimony? And for the last time, is there anyone else from the public that would like to give public testimony at this time? Hearing none?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Arlo.
This is Alder Adam Marchand. I move that we close the public hearing portion of this meeting.
Second. Is there a discussion on closing the public portion of this meeting? Go ahead, Alder Marchand. I see your hand.
I'm speaking in favor of the motion, but I also would like to mention to the public that they can always send their testimony, whether there's a meeting happening or not, via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. City of New Haven, newhavenct.gov, that's right.
Yes.
And that the next public hearing will be on Tuesday, March 30th. I encourage colleagues to support the motion to close the public portion of this meeting.
Any other discussion on closing the public portion of this meeting? Any other discussion? Alder Marchand, are you in favor of closing it?
Yes.
Alder DeCola?
Yes.
Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers?
Yes.
Alder Festa?
Yes.
Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez?
Yes.
Alder Hurt?
Yes.
Alder Decker?
Yes.
Thank you all. The public portion is now closed.
Madam Chair, I move item 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Item 1 has been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Alder Marchand.
I am speaking in favor of this ordinance amendment that makes the transfer of $25,000 from salary line to the overtime line, all within the OBIE budget, the building department budget. I think this is a fairly straightforward transfer. And as my colleague from the 10th Ward noted earlier, this is not a department that comes to us all the time for such transfers. We're not talking about some kind of chronic problem, but rather simply the need to get the work done at a time when there are vacancies on the staff. I do hope that those vacancies may be filled, but what's before us is making the transfer so that those overtime hours can be properly accounted for in the budget. I hope colleagues will support the motion to give it a favorable recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other discussion from colleagues, committee on the transfer? Any other discussion from colleagues? All right, hearing none, we will take a vote. Alder Marchand, are you in favor of moving the item
Yes.
favorably? Alder DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Morrison,
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Furlow,
Yes.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez,
Yes.
Alder Ron Hurt,
Yes.
and Alder Charles Decker.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone's in favor. Myself, I'm also in favor of moving the item favorably.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Alder Marchand.
before the motion to adjourn, may I make a quick announcement about
Go
our
right
schedule?
ahead.
Thank you. I just would like to remind colleagues and the public that this is the first of many meetings that our committee will have on the budget. The next meeting is on Tuesday, March 30th. It includes a public hearing. As of right now, the departments that are tentatively scheduled to appear for the workshop include the Board of Alders, the Department of Finance, the City Town Clerk, Persons with Disabilities, the Mayor's Office, Finance other departments, the Registrar of Voters, Corporation Council, Assessor's Office, and the Fair Rent Commission. You'll note that the Department of Finance often includes quite a few things, including such items as debt service, pensions, and healthcare. So that is a big ticket item for sure. The next meeting is the following day on Wednesday, March 31st. It's the second workshop, departmental workshop featuring departments from the chief administrators, from the economic development group, as well as the community services group. Then we have workshop number 3 on April 12th, which includes police, fire, and the library, among others. And then Thursday, April 15th will be the 4th workshop, which includes the special services districts and the Board of Education. May 10th, Monday, May 10th is public hearing number 3. And then we have 2 dates scheduled for deliberations, May 13th and May 20th. The Board of Alders special meeting on the budget is scheduled for Wednesday, May 26th. So soon, once we've confirmed all of these dates and all of the departments, we will send out a notice with an update to our calendar so that it can be out there on the web and in the public, the reach of the public. But just a quick reminder that the next meeting is in a few weeks. It's Tuesday, March 30th, 3 weeks from tomorrow. It includes the second public hearing and some important workshops. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor of adjourning?
Madam Chair, I believe we should call the roll.
Call the roll. I know, I was trying to get away with that. Alder Marchand, are you in favor of adjourning? Alder DeCola?
Yes.
Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers?
Yes.
Alder Festa?
Yes.
Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez?
Yes.
Alder Ron Hurt?
Yes.
And Alder Charles Decker.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, committee, as well as other colleagues that have joined us this evening, as well as the public. We look forward to seeing and hearing you at our next meeting. Have a blessed evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Whew.